Welcome to Sex Crimes Defense Podcast with Chance and Jay. Chance Oberstein is a defense attorney who handles sex crimes in California. I'm a media professional. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to be legal advice. We are in part four of Jeffrey Epstein. We're going to wrap this up, but I think we need a few more minutes. You were talking about the DOJ's credibility?
Well, I'm not there yet.
Okay.
But I'm at the government's response to her initial arguments. Now, remember, we talked about this before, but what she's saying is she's asking the Supreme Court to resolve this client split, arguing that inconsistent interpretations undermine the integrity of the federal plea deals, of federal plea deals. And so you look at the government's position on this, and the Justice Department argues that the MPA was geographically limited to Florida, and that Maxwell's case isn't the right vehicle to resolve the broader legal question. They think this is pretty clear. One jurisdiction, like one state doesn't bind another state. One jurisdiction doesn't bind, maybe within that state, but not between two states. And then you go to scope of conduct. Prosecutors, this is, I think, their better argument, I think. And this is why I think they say it's inappropriate. Prosecutors also note that Maxwell was convicted for conduct from 1994 to 1997, which predates the 2001 to 2007 window covered by the Florida agreement. And I think that's why they say it's not the right vehicle, because that agreement doesn't even apply to her conduct. So how can she be covered in it? And in the agreement, when it talks about, coverage for co-conspirators, when they said the United States, what her attorneys are arguing is, look, when it says the United States, it covers all the states in the Union and all its territories, okay? But it also could be interpreted as that state within the United States, but you would think that it would at least cover the conduct. And so I think this is more important than anything else, the scope of conduct. I think it's really important to take into consideration that she wasn't mentioned in the agreement. It was his co-conspirators. So even if the court says, yeah, if it's within the United States, it's clear and unequivocal, it covers everybody, all prosecutors' hands are tied in every single state if one deal is made. It's the federal government. Therefore, it binds all of us. However, in her case, her conduct precluded the agreement. So how could she be part of it? Does that make sense?
It does. And I'm going to pull us out of the weeds a little bit back into social perspective, because I think what I'm seeing, and I've looked at a lot of cases, is that society can't handle or grasp what is alleged and then the plea deal that gets made. They don't like it, but that's how the law works. So if you don't like it, you don't like the law as much as probably everybody else. Because the thing is that if you go by morality of when and what, and it's bad. I'm not going to defend her. I am never going to defend Ghislaine Maxwell, and I'm never going to defend Jeffrey Epstein. I have tried to pose questions in the past, but it is so deep and dark with these two. My gosh. So I get it. And the victims, it is victim after victim after victim. Initially in the 90s, essentially, because what was really happening? Well, Jeffrey was paying $200 for basically a massage that could turn into sex. And these $200 massages basically were solicited to high school girls. And if a high school girl came and got her $200, she could make another $200 by just bringing other girls and not have to do anything. And that's how it became a pyramid scheme that's crazy. Then Ghislaine would also go find girls, and that's how it is. It is hundreds of girls.
I'm sure.
Right now, I don't think anybody even knows the total. And there's a lot that are documented. So it's bad.
One person knows. Yeah. And that's Ghislaine.
Right.
But this isn't, we go round in circles, but believe me, by the time we get to the end of this, we're going to tie it up. We're going to tie it up.
Well, so, okay, here's the problem. Here's why it's hard, almost impossible to get your arms around this. If Jeffrey and Ghislaine and high school girls recruiting high school girls is a number of victims, how do you wrap your head around Lolita Express Jet, the pedophile island, and all of the powerful money, influence, elite society, associates, connections, etc., clients? I mean, it's almost impossible. And yeah, I guess Ghislaine is the only one that really knows.
Well, yeah, but how do you get around it? You understand that that's what the 2008 plea was all about. And you understand that it's not one side of an aisle or another side in terms of the political aspect of this. It's about the powerful and elite. And it's about it doesn't matter whether they're red or blue. Okay? It's about the powerful and the elite. That's what it's about. Okay? And you get all roads lead to the Department of Justice. And either it has integrity or it doesn't have integrity. Because it doesn't look like it has much integrity in 2008. And that's what caused this fuss in the beginning. It doesn't have any integrity. It's not transparent. It's a sham. Okay. And here we are. And we're thinking, well, there's some justice in it. I mean, after all, she got 20 years. Maybe it's not a sham. Maybe, really? Well, let's take a look at this for a minute. I mean, what's next? The Supreme Court, of all people, the Supreme Court. Her petition has been distributed to the court's long conference on September 29th, when justices considered cases accumulated over the summer. And so what can the court do here? What can the Supreme Court do? Well, they could deny review. They can say, no, we're not interested. Or they can hear the case and issue a ruling because there's a split in jurisdictions. Or they can remand it for further proceedings along with their guidance to a lower court. They can do that. You can only guess what's going to happen. You can only guess. But the question isn't what the Supreme Court's going to do. The question is whether or not through all of this, the DOJ, has the DOJ's credibility been impacted by its handling of this case? Well, we've just been talking about it for almost every episode, because in every instance, starting from 2008, it has failed, it has failed, and it has failed. And so we come to this junction because this is in-your-face failure. And you look at it, yes, the DOJ's credibility has come under fire following Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche's direct involvement in interviewing Ghislaine Maxwell, a move widely described as far outside the norm by legal experts and former prosecutors. Even the people who negotiated the 2008 deal are offended by this because it's so in your face. It's just totally unconscious. It's unconscionable. It's controversial. Have you thought about this for a minute? Have you pondered this?
Well, I will say what I'm realizing now is we're in part 4 of 4. We're going to keep it at 4, but we never even mentioned a president, which is the whole reason people are talking about this. So I want to keep it light, but I want to say this is that apparently part of the homework and the internet sleuthing is that a president and Jeffrey Epstein knew each other much better than people realize. And it's possible that a first lady was introduced to a president through Jeffrey Epstein, and down upon the Dante's Inferno you go.
Well, what makes people think about that, because that certainly is true. I mean, at least the Friendship Association, and I think the president has admitted to such. Who knows where his wife comes in, or how she's introduced, or what her relationship is between Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Who knows? We don't know. But we definitely know about the friendship. So
I'm
The
surprised he's able to draw that line in the blood.
well, the problem with it is the way it's being handled. Okay, because the way it's being handled keeps the questions coming. It keeps people thinking, individuals thinking. There's so much more to this because one, Blanche, which is DOJ's second in command and a formal personal attorney to the president, personally conducted the interviews rather than delegating to career prosecutors familiar with the case. That's number one. Two, she's a convicted sex trafficker with a documented history of dishonesty, including perjury charges that were dropped after her conviction. Critics argue she has strong incentives to lie in hopes of leniency and a pardon. And three, Blanche's ties to Trump and the timing of the interviews amid pressure to release the Epstein related files, which we've talked about already, have fueled speculation that the DOJ is pursuing political damage control rather than justice. This is what's fueling the fire. I mean, that's in your face, totally in your face. And so when you start to speculate, as you have done just a moment ago, about who, including the president, could be on that list, and what was the nature of their involvement, moves like this really, really strengthen the idea that underneath it all, there's something really wrong here. It's not necessarily what's being done; it's how it's being done, and under what circumstances it's being done in, and it's pretty clearly in your face. I mean, multiple former DOJ officials expressed disbelief that such a high-ranking figure as Blanche would personally engage with a convicted felon seeking political cooperation. That's just ridiculous and unheard of. And it may be top Democrats who have demanded the DOJ release all interview recordings and commit to no pardon, sentence, or reduction because they think it just shows that they just fear of a corrupt bargain. They're political creatures. I don't care about that.
Yeah,
I do care about the appearance of impropriety. I do care about integrity, and I do care about transparency, and I don't care what color that is.
well, I do think this is the one issue that's really hurting the base of the president. But I won't get my hopes up too high in that. I mean, I just can't imagine how you get out from under this. But in society, daily, we are surprised at what we see. And we regularly question reality. This is so weird.
Well, it is weird, and I understand the motivation of her attorney, and I get it. I don't necessarily understand the DOJ, but if the 2008 plea deal looked bad and was horrible and totally lacked integrity, so does the DOJ's handling of this situation now, from every aspect of it. And it just leaves a bad taste in the mouth of anybody who hears about it, thinks about it, or talks about it. And that's what fuels the story and keeps it going. Because I think in the end, all of us are seeking to, one, understand what happened, and two, accountability for the survivors and the victims. I think that is something that's just so preeminent here and is just totally being overlooked.
And maybe it's possible then that it's under that backdrop of incredulity of the way things work that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell found each other and went on to do things nobody thought of doing.
Maybe so. And maybe they engaged others to follow suit. Not because they were forcing them to do so,
That's
but they were
correct.
inclined to do it anyways and found a vehicle to achieve it.
They were serving up a secret service that they found many others privately desired.
The problem is that we live in a society where everybody under the bar, which means, you know, not a billionaire at least, not part of the powerful and elite structure of this country, ends up on a list, ends up in jail or in prison on a list and living under a bridge. And the other half ends up being totally innocuous and unknown.
Yeah, and the other half may end up on the list one day, but there's always somebody else who's not on the list and then ends up on the list. And where do we go? We go to an unending list that doesn't really do much.
Well, the issue is whether or not, and notwithstanding that list, whether or not we're going to hold everybody in this country to the same principles, whether everybody's going to be subject to the law, and whether there's going to be true accounting and there's a real Department of Justice who has real integrity. That's the issue. And you know what? So far, not so good.
Lots of episodes to come on Sex Crimes Defense Podcast with Chance and Jay. Thanks for joining us on this one. A lot to unwrap. Please let us know if you have a case to recommend, an individual or a situation, a deal, allegation, or otherwise. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.